Hi, I'm Noor, and today I'm going to tell you a little bit about vaping. But first, some background. Imagine you're a scientist who smokes 3 packs of cigarettes a day and you lost a parent to lung cancer. Wanting to help yourself quit, you created the first commercially successful smokeless cigarette, and then 20 years later, the industry starts marketing people who've never smoked before, and suddenly your well intentioned device starts making non smokers more likely to quit and actually start smoking and vaping. Also, you now smoke and vape. This is the story of how a tool for harm reduction created a vaping epidemic in America. We'll start by talking about the prevalence of vaping, and then I'll tell you some details about what vaping is and how it's different from traditional cigarettes. And then I just have to tell you about the health benefits, because that I think is the most important part. But first, according to the National Center for Health Statistics, the percent of people who are adults and used e-cigarettes increased from 4.5% in 2019 to 6.5% in 2023, and the number is pretty similar for youth, with the FDA saying that 6% of all middle and high schoolers nationwide use vape products. And dependency on nicotine is also very high. A USC study showed that from 2020 to 2024, among youth who already vaped, the percent of youth who vape daily increased from 15 to 28%. And often, people from rural communities and underserved backgrounds are often the ones who end up vaping more than anyone else. And that's because the tobacco industry targets minorities by offering discounts in those communities, having tailored advertising, and even sponsoring events. And these all contribute to exacerbating health disparities that we see. But a little bit more context into the prevalence of vaping and why that's an issue based on what vapes are. So, vapes have a coil that basically heats a liquid that the user is going to breathe in as an aerosol that contains nicotine. Within just 10 seconds, the aerosol is going to reach your alveoli, which are air sacs in your lungs, and then it's going to get into your bloodstream and go to your brain and produce a signal. Long-term effects of nicotine include having an increased number of receptors in your brain that bind to nicotine, and if you have a lot of unoccupied receptors, that gets sent to you as signals, so you're going to feel a lot more cravings, and then you start needing more nicotine to feel normal again, which creates nicotine dependency and makes quitting incredibly difficult. I've heard people tell me that they vape because they think it's safer than traditional cigarettes. And while it's true that vaping is less harmful because it has less chemicals, it still has a lot of nicotine, so it certainly isn't safe, and it's not an FDA approved way to quit vaping or smoking. A 2025 study by UC San Diego showed that cessation rates are actually a lot lower among smokers who vape than smokers who had not vaped at all. So I guess that shows you that smoking to vaping really isn't the best way to quit smoking. But in addition, vaping tends to be more harmful because vaping is less aggressive than traditional cigarettes, as it's easier to vape inside and continuously for longer periods of time, which often leads to higher and more frequent nicotine dosages. The health effects I'm sure you've heard of before, but I've been seeing these everywhere as a student and growing up also in a community with a lot of minorities. I've seen how it's affected a lot of people. And usually the symptoms start with something small, but I've seen that sometimes these symptoms can be signs of some bigger underlying condition. Like in 2019, public health officials identified e-cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury, which is a severe and potentially fatal respiratory illness that's linked to vaping, and that causes a buildup of fluid. That condition was caused by vitamin E acetate in THC containing vapes, which coated the alveoli and it prevented the lungs from oxygenating the blood. And then, in addition to that, acetane can also create ketone gas, which is highly toxic to the body. so that may have contributed as well. But in general, heated metal coils and vapes release metals in the vapor, and that can be toxic and cause problems like bronchitis, or in the case of breathing in nickel, that can even cause cancer. But among young people, the health effects can have an even bigger impact. For instance, nicotine harms the developing brain and makes it harder to learn and focus. It's been shown to worsen mental health amongst youth, and early nicotine exposure makes youth more likely to smoke later on in life. But beyond all that is known, the scary part is that there's still a lot unknown. For instance, we don't know what happens when a vape substance is heated. Like glycerol, a component of vapes, can decompose into really harmful molecules if it's heated, and when that's taken in as an aerosol, that can have really unknown side effects. And we also don't know a lot about the secondhand effects of vaping. But overall, there's tools and resources to help those who are facing trouble quitting their use of vape. And one of those resources is called Kick It California. They provide free one-on-one quit coaching, but in addition to resources like behavioral therapy or quit coaches, it would be a great idea for you to visit a physician so you can get access to medications, possibly something like Wellbutrin to help with withdrawal symptoms, or a medicine like Chantix, which might help block your nicotine receptors and reduce the pleasure you get from vaping. So, with all of this in mind, the bottom line is that if you can avoid vaping, you should. Today, we talked about the high rates of vaping, which are mostly due to dependence and targeted marketing by the tobacco industry. We then covered differences between vapes and traditional cigarettes. And then, finally, we discussed the health effects of vaping. Going forward, one of the best ways for you to play an active role in combating the vaping epidemic is by educating others and by spreading awareness of the problem. The tobacco industry targets the most vulnerable, and it's our responsibility to protect our communities.